Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Wednesday, February 12th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Coming up in a few minutes, cats are not immune from the ever-evolving bird flu virus.
The chances of this happening are not very large, but they're not zero.
We'll hear how it has already affected these beloved pets and what animal experts want you to know. But first, these headlines. Pro-immigrant groups gathered on Tuesday in Tulare as thousands attended the opening day of the World Ag Expo. The gathering of farm leaders from around the world comes as farm workers without legal status have come under risk of deportation here in the Valley. Gloria Hernandez is a community activist. She says ag leaders have a responsibility to speak up for farm workers.
Without them, Tulare County would not make billions in profits, or the Central Valley. And people aren't acknowledging that, and I think that we need to wake up.
The World Ag Expo runs until tomorrow. Meanwhile, Fresno County leaders are forming a working group they say will help address immigrant concerns. As KVPR's Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado reports, it's in response to heightened anxiety over immigration enforcement actions.
The so-called Immigrant Affairs Working Group is being spearheaded by Fresno Councilmember Miguel Arias and Fresno County Supervisor Luis Chavez. Chavez says the purpose of the group is to create a support network. Last month, the Trump administration got rid of a policy that prevented immigration agents from entering schools, churches, and hospitals. These were previously considered, quote, protected areas. The change has raised the possibility of immigrants without legal status being detained and deported from more places. California passed a sanctuary law during Trump's first term. This working group will utilize that sanctuary state status and will encourage the city and county of Fresno to develop education and outreach. The group will also help coordinate policy efforts that support immigrant communities. For KVPR News, I'm Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado.
California is issuing new maps that show the dangers of wildfires. The state's fire marshal has calculated so far that 2.3 million acres of land in the state are at high or very high danger of wildfires. That acreage accounts for mostly areas of inland Northern California. Governor Gavin Newsom issued an executive order last week requesting an update on the state's fire risk. The state's fire marshal is expected to release updated maps for other parts of the state in the coming weeks. A popular Sierra Nevada ski destination will not open this season due to extremely low snow levels. Badger Pass ski area officials say they made the decision in consultation with the National Park Service. Officials say any snowfall in the coming days will not make up for the current snow levels. Season pass holders are expected to receive a refund.
Join KVPR for an event with NPR senior White House correspondent Tamara Keith, Wednesday, February 26th at Fresno City College. Get an inside perspective on covering the White House for NPR at this in-person event. Tamara Keith grew up in Hanford before going on to cover world events and presidents for audiences nationwide. Seating is limited. RSVP for this free event online at kvpr.org/events.
And now to our main story. We continue to learn more about how the bird flu virus is evolving. And while the virus has already shown up in dozens of California dairy and poultry farms, it's also jumped to dozens of humans in the state. Most of those infected had direct contact with infected dairy cattle. One person in the U.S. has died from bird flu. Health experts caution that bird flu remains a low risk to humans, but one household pet has increasingly run the risk of catching and spreading the virus. Those are our domestic cats. In recent years, more than 80 cats have been confirmed to have bird flu around the country. Some of those cats lived on dairy farms, but it opens the question of what the general risk to this type of animal is. Joining us now to talk more about the risk of bird flu on cats is Sarah Boden. She's an independent journalist who recently reported on this topic for KFF Health News. Sarah starts us out by explaining how cats can come into contact with the virus.
One would be a cat drinking unpasteurized milk or eating raw food. And, veterinarians are advising against feeding your pet that kind of food at this time. Also, cats could get it from interacting with infected animals, especially if you have an indoor-outdoor cat or a barn cat, feral cat, maybe hunting songbirds or rodents. Bird flu has also been found in a lot of mice. And then also, it's possible that somehow your cat interacts with the excrement of wild birds in particular, or an infected animal. So those are primarily the ways that your cat would get bird flu. Though recently there was one study that found that cats, at least one house cat, got bird flu from a human who worked in a dairy that had issues with bird flu as well.
What are some signs to look out for that might tell us if a cat is sick with bird flu?
Discharge around the eyes, nose. Also, there are neurological symptoms, like your cat might be acting uncoordinated, sort of drunk maybe, also seizures. Those are signs I would be looking out for.
And let's pivot on the concern that this poses to humans. Can you walk us through what veterinary experts are cautioning about how we interact with cats?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to be very clear that while there is not, veterinarians and virologists tell me that while the risk is not zero, the risk is very low. So I don't want people to feel afraid of their cat or feel like, their cat's going to come home from a midnight prowl and spread bird flu to the entire household. That's not what experts I've spoken to said, but there is a small risk that this is possible. And that's because, we have a lot of interactions with our cats. They sleep in our beds, they climb all over our faces. When we're not looking, they get on our kitchen counters and drink from our water glasses. We scoop their poop. So, we have a lot of contact with our cats, and that does create a possibility that a cat with bird flu might transmit it, or a person might catch bird flu from their cat.
So, yes, as you mentioned, the veterinarians don't think there's really a huge risk to humans here, but is there sort of like a threshold to exposure to a sick cat, or any specific scenarios people should be aware of?
So Angela Rasmussen, who I spoke to for the story, she's a virologist in Canada, and she told me that unless a cat is really shedding a lot of virus, and it would be very hard to get the virus from your cat. But she also said it is not outside the realm of possibility. She doesn't think it's a huge possibility, but she's not, again, super afraid of that. But I've spoken to other experts who seem perhaps more concerned, feel like it is more plausible that a person could catch bird flu from their pet cat. But they also say that, the chances of this happening are not very large, but they're not zero. And I think what I really want people to take home from this story is that, when we talk about bird flu cases and people getting bird flu, a lot of that is really focused on agricultural workers. And this is a very serious virus that isn't presenting a huge threat to human health, but, a few mutations could lead to something more serious. And so I just want people to be aware that they can interact with bird flu in more ways than maybe are currently being discussed, and pet cats is one of them.
Sure, and I do think that's a natural question for folks who have cats and have heard about barn cats, like you say, being exposed at dairies and just the way viruses can spread. In your report, you say that a number of cats in Los Angeles County have been sickened with bird flu after consuming raw milk. Now, that milk actually came from Fresno County. What more can you tell us about that scenario?
Yeah, so these cats, these were 5 cats, and I were told they came from 2 different households, and they tested positive for bird flu after drinking unpasteurized raw milk. I emailed with the dairy that produced this raw milk, and they feel that this was a political issue, and they're very adamant that their milk is safe to consume. Nonetheless, veterinarians are really discouraging people from giving raw milk or raw food to their pets because of the concern of bird flu.
And we have been talking about cats specifically, but what about risks for other pets, like families who have dogs?
Yeah, so the dog question is really interesting. Why cats seem to be getting it more than dogs. There is some disagreement about whether cats are something about their biology makes them more susceptible than dogs, but also cat behaviors do put them at higher risk. We have more feral cat colonies than feral dog packs in this country. Also, cats really are into dairy, so we see a lot of barn cats, but not a lot of barn dogs in this country. And then, I think it's more likely that a house pet cat will be allowed outside unsupervised to go and cat about, do some hunting and some prowling where usually people don't allow their dogs outside unsupervised. And so I think those sort of cat behaviors also put these pets at a higher risk than dogs. But dogs in other countries have gotten bird flu. So if your dog is sniffing around outside and they find something like a dead bird or a dead animal, I would keep an eye on your dog. And so I think it's important to be very aware of how we are interacting with animals and wildlife right now, because even though bird flu is not currently able to transmit easily from person to person, a few mutations and that could change, and we could be in a really bad situation. So I think people should just be really aware of their exposure risks, even if it's very low.
That was my conversation with Sarah Boden. She recently reported on bird flu risks among cats for KFF Health News. And that does it for today's show. If you like what you hear on Central Valley Daily, help support the show by leaving a 5-star rating in your podcast app. We appreciate your support. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
Each morning, it's a new opportunity, a chance to start fresh. Up First from NPR makes each morning an opportunity to learn and to understand. Choose to join the world every morning with Up First, a podcast that hands you everything going on across the globe and down the street, all in 15 minutes or less. Start your day informed and anew with Up First by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts.